Public speaking. I have not done. I took one public speaking class, and I was a homeschooler. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm glued to my notes, because if I go off that, it's going to be pretty awkward. But I'm here today to talk about creating startups with God at the center. So my name is Beau Walsh. I own a very small agency in Duluth that primarily builds brands and websites. I started out as just a freelancer, but after a few years of that, I realized that the work I do could be so much more impactful with more people and more value behind it. So I started working with a great contracting writer that could expand the work we do into much more robust and all-encompassing projects. So in this last year, I went from calling myself a freelancer to the owner of a small design agency, which is super weird, but also really cool to see God's faithfulness in all of it. And that company is called The Cultural North. The Cultural North. We want to ask the question, what is the peak of culture? What is the north on this compass of culture? So for us, that's not Duluthian, it's not American, it's not African or European, it's the kingdom of God, manifested in every ethnicity. The culture that Jesus came to define for us by living his perfect life, that's the peak of culture. So we want to take the values of the kingdom of God and usher them into the businesses that we work with, pointing people to the truth about themselves and hopefully start to percolate the question, how can we be more authentic? And ultimately, why does this cultural north matter? Because to us, the cultural north is not just the name of our business, it's actually a movement that we want to see throughout the city and throughout the world, where people are doing excellent work backed by important values, and they're doing it to the glory of God. For us, these values are things like honesty, transparency, grace, passion, and generosity. So how can we start a movement in our sphere of influence that causes new businesses to think about their contribution over their compensation? How can we all strive to be a part of the cultural north? Again, the kingdom of God. So with that definition, think about how we can start to spread the cultural north throughout this city and the change that can come from it. This mindset can be adopted by families, church members, employees, and what I'd like to talk about today, entrepreneurs. As a designer, I get to work with lots of different types of businesses, including startups, and from that perspective, I get to see all the different ways that businesses have an impact on the culture of the area. So what does it look like to start something with God at the center? First, I would say that entrepreneurship means solving a problem in the community. First and foremost, for a business to be successful, it has to solve a problem for the customer. It has to fulfill some internal desire that they have, and then they have to be, in turn, willing to pay for that. And as believers, we want to create something that truly contributes to the community. This means doing it authentically, because we want to be true representations of ourselves to the world around us. So when defining your business, it should always drive back to the why. We always say that, start with why. Why are you even doing this? Why does your business matter here and now? For us, it's engaging the culture, but what is your why? As you keep giving answers, we'll probably keep digging deeper to the core, ultimately reaching a God-glorifying reason behind it all. We don't just build websites. In a world full of chaos and information flying all over the place, we want to simplify that world by effectively conveying messages through an enjoyable and beautiful experience. Maybe you don't just build houses, you create a place where families can flourish, stay warm in Duluth, make memories, and invite others to be a part of it. Maybe you don't just own a coffee shop, you facilitate an environment where friends can meet, students can hunker down, and guys like me can be productive, because that's where I go. That has huge kingdom value. So dig deep to that. Be empowered by that. God has given you an idea and specific talents that you can use to bless the community. We need to celebrate the why and return to it as our source of motivation, and that's God. Secondly, as an employee, you can subtly influence the culture you're placed in, but as an owner, you can set it. You get to create a culture. This is one of the coolest parts of being a business owner. You get to decide what the direction of your business is, how clear your process is, how good your product is, and how people are treated. That's customers and employees. That's all affected by the values of the culture that you set. So it's the trajectory of your product or service out to anyone that interacts with it. And it goes further than you may even understand. You spend every day with employees working towards a common goal, modeling values, and they're going to a family where they can continue to live out those values. Same with customers. How can you display to them values that will spread into their lives? If we want to truly contribute our piece of the kingdom of God to the community, it has to be intentionally built into that process. So how do we create a culture in our companies that can actually impact our work and the people that interact with it? Well, I'll start off by saying it's not with buzzwords. You know these words. They're the words that everyone uses, so much so that they've started to even lose their meaning. Like synergistically innovate iPhone apps with integrity. You put them all together and somehow there's a sentence. We don't really know how to define it or what that actually means, but it's a sentence. So one of the questions that we ask in our branding process is, what are the key values that you have as a company? And we asked this one client a group of them, and we let each person think about it. You know, what are those values? What is that if you could distill it down into one core value, what would you say that is for your company? And they all like took some time to respond, and they thought, and then almost all of them said integrity. And we said, great. Is that something that people who interact with your company say defines you? And after an awkward silence, someone spoke up and said, well, not at the moment, but I think if we say that about ourselves, we'll start to actually be it. And so your values have to be authentic. They have to be a part of your culture, because integrity isn't something you say that you have. It's something you have to display over a long period of time. So that's something that we continue to drive back to when we work with our clients, is what are these core values that define you? And for us as the Cultural North, we want them to be authentic words. So with that, define what words actually mean. Don't just spit out the best word that sounds like cool or accurate or like the millennials might enjoy it. You know, find something that truly means something and make that word and that value connect back to the kingdom of God. So again, define what words mean. Let them be sacred and deep and powerful. Don't just say things you might sell that might sell more product. Be intentional with your communication and let it mean something to you. So the point here is that in order to spread the kingdom of God, we have to have a deep and true understanding of who we are. That's every strength and every weakness. In a sense, it's not about hiring the right agency to spin your weaknesses into strengths. It's about being honest of your limitations and intentionally growing in the places that you need to grow. You establish your relationship to your employees by how you relate to your employees, not by how you say you relate to your employees. You create an experience for your customers based on how they experience it, not how you say it is. I think that's such a common thing today, is to project, this is what my business is, this is how people should respond to my product, this is how people should interact with my brand, and we don't actually take the time to see how are they responding. Are we creating a soft, beautiful experience that guides them through the process and makes them comfortable the entire way throughout, and just creating that ease and enjoyment? So that's something that I'm actually currently working on. I'm digging into these values that I have for the Cultural North and constantly rethinking my process. To challenge and walk alongside clients, but to not just let them buy a website or logo, but to help them rethink about who they are themselves. So we want to build a much deeper process of introspection, helping them dig into the profound gifts that they have, believe it or not, and thinking about how they can offer something to this community. So this is something that I'm working on right now, seeking God and his kingdom as I walk through our process. How can I bring more value to my clients? How can we bring more value? And then through entrepreneurship, we have this moment where it comes to we can either trust God or not trust God. And so this is such a challenge for people and an open opportunity for them to trust God. At Rock Hill, we say that the giving of our tithes and offerings is in itself a way of worshiping God. That money that we have is just a symbol of his faithfulness to us, which we don't deserve. That's a gift. And then in giving, we're confessing that we trust in him and his providence, a declaration of trust. That is worship. The talents and passions that we have are gifts from God. That idea for a business we have, big or small, is a gift from God. So in our endeavors in business ownership, we're receiving God's gift of our talents and passions and trusting in him that he will accomplish his will through us. We're asking him to use us in our day-to-day lives as we navigate the world and attempt to contribute to it. This gift I have, how can I share it with this community, and how can it be blessed? And then ultimately, we're saying, Father, whatever grace you have for me, may I use it to glorify you. And he says, seek my kingdom above all else and live righteously, and I will give you everything you need. May we all trust him in every moment of our lives as we pursue together and point others to the cultural north. Thank you. And up next is Judd.